Sega's not quite a hit color portable gaming device, the Game Gear, debuted in Japan in October of 1990. The system was not a huge hit and did not leave a notable legacy. That being said, the system does have a cult following, and out of its 300 plus games, there are a handful of them that are looked upon fondly. One of those games is Shining Force: The Sword of Hajya, a standalone, one-of-a-kind Shining Force title just for the Game Gear. Little did we know that this was actually the second portable Shining Force. Little did we dorky little Sega fans know that this was the second portable Shining Force. Shining Force Ensei Jashin no Kunihi, also known as Shining Force Gaiden, was released on Christmas Day 1992 in Japan and was not localized for English markets. But a mere 6 months later, in June of 1993, Sega dropped Shining Force: The Sword of Hajya, also known as Shining Force Gaiden 2, which was released in part of the English-speaking world in 1994. Gaiden 2 received favorable reviews back in the day and has since been solidified as one of the best Game Gear games released. And this week we are going to talk all about it. And we're also going to talk more about Shining Force CD, because Sword of Hajya was one of the games remastered for this incredible title. So pour yourself a glass of power wine, heat up a plate of quick chicken, and butter up that cheerful bread. Today we are talking all about Shining Force: The Sword of Hajya. I'm Richard for RPG Fortress, and this is part 2 of our super mega massive gigantic Shining Force CD/Gaiden retrospective. Arriving a mere 6 months after Shining Force Gaiden, Shining Force Gaiden 2: The Sword of Hajya shares a lot of DNA with its predecessor. Sega was keen on Sonic Co. for releasing new Shining titles every 6 to 13 months. Sonic Co. could easily keep up with the demands and at the same time release solid titles. Shining in the Darkness, March 1991, Shining Force, March 1992, Shining Force Gaiden, December 1992, and Shining Force: The Sword of Hajya, June 1993. 4 games in 3 years is pretty wild. And yeah, both Gaiden and Gaiden 2 were out before Shining Force 2. Shining Force 2 wouldn't grace the Mega Drive until October 1993, a mere 4 months after The Sword of Hajya. Sonic Co. was never a team, so seeing them drop so many great games in such a short time is truly inspiring. Or maybe concerning. I really hope that they had some time off. Crunch culture sucks. Join a union, crush capitalism, etc. Unlike the previous Gaiden, Gaiden 2 was localized for the Game Gear in North America. At this stage, it was apparent that the Game Gear wasn't going to be nearly as huge as Nintendo's Game Boy, but the game did well enough. It was even eventually ported to the Sega CD along with Gaiden 1 as the incredible Shining Force CD. Most of the first Gaiden's game staff returned for Hajya, including the Takahashi brothers, directing and producing the game, character designs by the amazing Hiroshi Kajiyama, and music by the excellent Motoaki Takenouchi. Not only are the games connected by the story and world, but they are also connected by these returning artists, and this makes the world and story that much more familiar. Sword of Hajya starts by telling us that after the events of Shining Force Gaiden, Guardiana and Cypress have banded together to stop Eom. Cut to the cult of Eom, preparing to sacrifice a king to, well, the demon Eom. The big bad of Shining Force Gaiden 2 is a man named Warderer, a powerful magician and swordsman who is hell-bent on reviving the Prince of Darkness, Eom. Within the lava-filled fortress of Eom, Warderer commands his troops to go beat up those dang do-gooders of Cypress and Guardiana. His cronies are Barbara, the Dark Elf axe-wielder, Solo the Magician, Gordon the, well, he's also a magician, and Hindle, the armored swordsman. You'll also later on see that Warderer also controls the undead soul of Woldol from the first Gaiden. Meanwhile, in Cypress and Guardiana soldiers are preparing to march on Eom to stop the bad guys from doing bad guy stuff. Nick and Guyan head out with the veteran soldiers to fight Eom, all the while leaving Mayfair and the junior troops behind to keep the castle safe and to guard the Sword of Hajya. While the veteran troops are out doing their things, you know, being brave and courageous and all that, the young troops are patrolling around the castle's courtyard, making sure no one breaks in and steals the Sword of Hajya. Nick's sword arm was turned to stone by Woldell as he died at the end of the previous game, so he has left his sword safe at the castle. Well, the young troops are mostly idiots and some goblins easily break in and steal the sword. Mayfair, acting as advisor, corrals the young soldiers into chasing after the sword. You command Deanna, a young swordsman with a mysterious past, as once again, Shining Force tropes. Natasha, a headstrong and dedicated mage. Dawn, a self-serious centaur knight. And the three Chuckle brothers, Eric the centaur knight, Jaha the dwarf fighter with a pot for a helmet, and Luke the portly monk. The story continues from there. It's a pretty decent little tale for a portable game. Lots of intrigue and skin-of-your-teeth encounters. Some party members from the first game reappear, like Randolph, Claude, and Guyan, but as she's now the advisor, Mayfair doesn't actually fight. But that's okay because Sarah joins and she's a much more powerful healer. You'll also eventually manage to recruit two characters from the original Shining Force, the powerful Samurai Musashi and the badass ninja Hanzo, although they are now named Rush and Higgins respectively. Why? Who knows why? It was the early 90s. Game translations were literally insane. Gameplay in Shining Force Gaiden 2 is exactly the same thing as the gameplay in Shining Force Gaiden 1. All of these same combat rules, truncated towns, stat boost items, promotions, etc, etc. So what am I going to talk about gameplay-wise? This is partially why I did the Shining Force 3 video as one long video for all three games. Not a lot changes gameplay-wise between the games. But I do have a few things I want to talk about that Sword of Hajya has that Gaiden doesn't. The first is good maps. Okay, well, the maps in Gaiden aren't bad, but they're not the maps in Sword of Hajya. Sword of Hajya has some of the best maps in the whole series. Maps are super important when it comes to tactics games. Battles are lengthy affairs that see you move across these huge battlefields, all the while engaging enemies. A flat map with no terrain or furniture is going to be super boring. A straight line with a couple of goblins is not going to be much fun at all. Sword of Hajya has some incredibly fun maps. The first map in the castle courtyard is a small map with goblins invading from the left and right sides of the screen. Another fun map is the one where you're chasing after Graham, and you are climbing a twisting mountain path while fighting bats. The underground fight against Gordon and his magical mushrooms is a tense fight through tight corridors. And there are many more. This game's maps are top tier. Something else that I like is how halfway through the game your party splits for a couple of battles. You don't get anything like this in the other Shining Force games. And I knew something was weird, how your mage Natasha starts with the egress spell, which is normally something that only your hero has. At the end of Chapter 2, your party is boarding a ship when the enemy attacks, destroying the ramp onto the ship and sends it spiraling into the open sea. As your party is split, you get a great opportunity to potentially use some units that you normally wouldn't have. Road is a surprisingly decent fighter. Something else I want to talk about is something that is completely insane, but thankfully only affects the Game Gear version of the game and not the Sega CD version. Blaze 3 and Freeze 3 are both broken. The three main attack spells in the Shining Force games are Blaze, Freeze, and Bolt. Each spell has 4 levels, and as the levels increase, they cause more damage and affect a differing amount of squares of the map. Out of the 3 spells, Blaze 1 and Freeze 1 only hit 1 unit. Bolt 1 hits 5 units. Blaze 2 and Freeze 2 hit 5 units. Bolt 2 hits 13 units. Blaze 3 and Freeze 3 hit 5 units. Bolt 3 hits 13 units. Blaze 4, Freeze 4, and Bolt 4 only hit 1 unit. Level 4 of all the spells are super powerful, so they are set to only hit one unit so you're not killing a dozen units with one spell. Bolt's ability to hit 13 spaces for level 2 and 3 is unique. Blaze and Freeze don't get this, and these spells cost a lot to cast. It's a payoff. Blaze is super affordable to cast but doesn't have much range or AoE. Freeze is a bit more expensive with better range but no change to AoE, and Bolt is the most expensive but also has the range of Freeze and lots more AoE. Sword of Hajya ruins the spell system by increasing the range of Blaze 3 to mirror Freeze 3 and Bolt 3, but also by increasing the AoE of Blaze 3 and Freeze 3 to 13 spaces. They have made Blaze 3 and Freeze 3's progression identical to Bolt 3. This destroys the nuance of all three spells. These spells hit way too many units and do way too much damage. Blaze 3 hits way too many units for 10 MP. This makes Bolt 3 obsolete. And Freeze 3 makes everything obsolete because its actual damage output has been doubled. Freeze 3 should hit 5 dudes for 20 damage at a cost of 12 MP. Now it hits 13 dudes for 45 damage at the cost of 12 MP. I got game over more than once from Freeze 3. I annihilated a third of all enemy units with one casting more than once. This change completely ruins the pace of the game for your party and for enemy units. Just get Natasha and Mei to Freeze level 3 and watch them steamroll through the rest of the game. As far as Game Gear games go, the Sword of Hajya is well remembered. I mean, I think so at least. Like Gaiden, I can't find any sales figures. There are a couple of notable views, like EGM giving it a 6.8 out of 10, but get out of here, this game is a solid 7. 7.5 on the Sega CD. 6.8? Get real, Game Players gave it a 91 though. Awesome. I miss Game Players. The game was released on the UK eShop for the 3DS in 2013, and it was also released on something called Palm OS in 2003. That's it. I shouldn't be surprised, but I was expecting it to be somewhere else. Maybe the Virtual Console or the Wii Shop or eShop for the 3DS, not just in the UK. But yeah, if you want to play this game in the modern age, you might as well just track down a real physical copy of Shining Force CD. If you have finished both Gaiden and Gaiden 2 on Shining Force CD, you unlock Book 3, an all-new adventure only available on Shining Force CD. Now, make sure you check back here in 2 weeks' time because I'm going to be discussing Books 3 and 4 of Shining Force CD, and those two scenarios are must-play. And that's Shining Force: The Sword of Hajya, a very satisfying mini-Force adventure. Stacked up against Gaiden, I definitely prefer this game a little bit more. It's just a little bit more tight, it has some improved maps, and everything is just a little bit more streamlined. Not saying that the gameplay in Gaiden is bad, but Hajya just definitely comes out on top between the two games. The continued story is great fun, and seeing recurring characters will have you doing the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme. Just that little bit of glue tying the games together does so much to make the world and story that much more memorable. I've always liked this sort of thing, something that I must have picked up from Phantasy Star. I think that the Sword of Hajya, either version, is a real good play even in 2023. Yes, the spell nonsense with the Game Gear version is kinda heinous, but the game also has a really easy debug mode where you can level up your dudes, so the difficulty is right out the window anyway. That being said, with the addition of the 3rd and 4th books in Shining Force CD, that is the one you really should be playing. And that is the Sword of Hajya. I really hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. How do you say Hajya? Leave a comment below and let's start the discussion. If you liked the video, you can do a few things to help the channel. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell, grab a membership, check our Patreon, buy a shirt, or join our Discord where we openly discuss the easiest ways to play retro games in 2023, underground black and death metal, and where each and every turf should be banished to. The answer is the core of the sun. I'm Richard for RPG Fortress. Thank you for watching, see you next time, and don't forget to hug a cat. Goodbye.